It is time for the nature-loving druids to be ranked. As with my other videos, this ranking is just my own casual opinion. Some of the downsides to my ranking system is I do put an equal weighting to each of the things I rank the characters on. Generally, I don't take into account items and consumables or anything like that. And I am just comparing subclasses within the class itself, not compared to the other classes. And as always, if you find a character fun, an idea fun, just go for that. So what will I be ranking the Druid subclasses on? Circles, as they are known. Well, they get some differences at level 2, which is when they choose their subclass. Level 6 and level 10. Each of them also gets some other benefits at different levels. I'm going to group all those together as other features, and I will look at multi-classing. So in third place, I have Circle of the Land. So for the level 2 feature, I got 4 out of 10. Same for level 6. Level 10 features are 5 out of 10. Other features 9 out of 10. And then multi-classing potential just down out of 3. So at level 2, when we choose our circle, we get 1 extra cantrip. And I really like this actually, because it means by the time we're level 10 or 11, there's only 1 cantrip you won't have taken, because we do get extra cantrip choices at other levels. So you don't have to worry too much about which cantrips you're not going to take on a Circle of the Land Druid. And the other thing we get is hidden all the way over here. Natural Recovery, which works just the same as recovering spell slots for a wizard, which is nice, but long resting is generally very easy and readily available. So taking that into account, actually the natural recovery isn't a huge boon for the Circle of the Land Druid. I don't tend to long rest too much, so I really like this personally, but I do really realise that I could long rest after every battle and still have enough camp supplies. So the true value of this isn't actually that great. Now as we level up, this is under other features actually, not level 6 features. At levels 3, 5, 7 and 9, we actually get to pick a different circle, gain 2 spells that are always prepared. And one thing I absolutely love about this, as I've said in some of my other videos, is we get to customize our character. We get to make changes. Every Circle of the Land Druid isn't going to be the same. Whereas once I've picked Circle of the Moon or Circle of the Spores, my path is set. Not that they're bad paths, but my path is set and I can't make any other changes. Whereas a Circle of the Land, we get access to 1, more prepared spells, and secondly, spells that aren't usually on the Druid spell list. That isn't true for every single spell. For example, here, Barkskin is a Druid spell, but Misty Step and Mirror Image are not. So at level 5, you get to pick 2 more spells based on which land. Really nicely, you don't have to pick the same land as before. So previously, I've already forgotten which one I picked. I think it was Coast. I can now pick Underdark here if I want to. I could pick Swamp. I don't have to pick the same one every single time. So we can mix and match. So Mountain, this is really cool. These are not Druid spells. So yeah, for other features, I absolutely love the Circle of the Land Druid for that. So at level 6, we get this Land Strides difficult terrain. Difficult terrain no longer slows you down. Circle of the Land, I'm not that impressed. Maybe for the Circle of the Moon, where you're going to be running around a bit more perhaps, this would be a bit more useful. But yeah, I'm just not that impressed. 4 out of 10 for that. And then at level 10, we get Nature's Ward. You can't be charmed or frightened by elementals or fae. If they just stopped at you can't be charmed or frightened, I'd be much more impressed with this. It's just to elementals and fae. We don't fight that many elementals or fae at level 10. Yeah, there are some, okay? I can't say we don't fight any. But actually, there aren't that many. Also, disease and poison can no longer affect you. That's kind of nice. It means that you can cast a spell such as Cloud Kill, which Circle of the Land Druids do get access to for 2 of their lands at level 9. Then you don't need to worry about it. Or if there are gas traps all around, you can send your Circle of the Land Druid in. So there are some good benefits. But when we compare it to the other subclasses' level 10 features, we'll find that it is just a bit lacking. So the total for the Circle of the Land was 25 out of 50. I don't think it's a bad choice. I think people do sometimes overlook this, and partially because it doesn't have quite the unique identity that Circle of the Moon and Circle of the Spores Druids have. Lots of people online are just like, oh yeah, Circle of the Land is just a wizard, but worse. Don't forget, as a Druid, we get medium armor proficiency, shield proficiency from the beginning, and you've got loads of different spells you get access to as a Druid, and you get to do some healing and you get lots of summons, and as a Circle of the Land Druid, you get access to some of the wizard spells anyway. So although Circle of the Land has come out as weakest subclass in my own rating system, I actually find it one of the most fun or most interesting to build because we get these choice of spells at the top, and I do personally value customization. Circle of the Land Druids really do best if you just stay as Circle of the Land, because that's where you get your bonus spells from. but I would take at least 9 levels in Circle the Land just to get all of this customization. Then I guess you could take 3 levels in a spellcasting class, but you're not going to get a huge amount in 3 levels, though I'd say Cleric is probably not a bad choice, especially since we've got the shared Wisdom casting modifier. Wizards are always going to be okay with just a 1 or 2 level dip because you can scribe scrolls, depending on your caster level, not your wizard level. But then the spell save DC for those is based on your intelligence, but you can be clever about it. So it's not like there's no multi-classing potential for Circle of the Land, but compared to the other subclasses, it is lacking. So then in second place, I've put Circle of the Moon. Level 2 features are at 8 out of 10. Level 6 features are 6 out of 10. Level 10 are 9 out of 10. The other features it gets down at just a 4 in multi-classing potential out of 5. So for the level 2 features, we actually get something very unique. We get Combat Wild Shape. So your Wild Shape now uses a bonus action instead of an action. For most Wild Shapes, this is actually good. This is great. There are some Wild Shapes that have a nice bonus action, such as the Spider, which lets you spit out a web, just as one example. So it's not perfect for every single Wild Shape, but it is pretty cool. We get Lunar Mend, expend spell slots to regain hit points while in Wild Shape. I don't actually use this that much, because we regain Wild Shape charges after a short rest. And as a Circle of the Moon Druid, if it only takes a bonus action to go back into Wild Shape, you're not going to die. It's fine. I'd save my spell slots for other things rather than just healing a relatively small number of hit points to something that I can recharge on a short rest anyway. We also get an extra Wild Shape Bear, which at that level is great, because 30 hit points is loads. All of a sudden, your Circle of the Moon Druid is going to be the last person to die in your party. You've got 90 hit points in total across 3 bears, plus your normal Druid hit points, which is probably not going to be very high at level 2. But the point is, yeah, this is really good for level 2. It does drop off later. And we get Goad, which is a fairly unique ability. There aren't many abilities in Baldur's Gate 3 or even Dungeons & Dragons that let you actually goad enemies into attacking you. The extra features, I'm going to go through them now. The extra features that the Circle of the Moon Druids get are 1 extra Wild Shape at level 4, the Dire Raven, which I don't think's that great. Blinding is good. I prefer my summons to do that. Like Find Familiar can do that. And at level 8, we get the Saber-Toothed Tiger Wild Shape. I mean, it's kind of cool to have this extra option, but I'm not using it very far after that because of the level 10 abilities. I'll get to that in a second. At level 6, we get Primal Strike. While in beast form, your attacks count as magical for the purposes of overcoming resistance and immunity to non-magical damage. It's needed. It's just not that impressive. It doesn't do anything really good, but it is kind of, yeah, it's necessary. And then at level 10, switched into game for this, we get extra shapes. We can turn into a Myrmidon. We can get these as summons, but it costs a level 6 spell slot. Whereas here, we can turn ourselves into one of these. So let's just say the Air Myrmidon. Myrmidon. And all of them have really cool abilities. All of them get elemental warps. Actually, if you want to get around somewhere very quickly as a Moon Druid, just turn into a Myrmidon and then just teleport around. All of them can also fly. Amazing. The armor class here is decent for a Wild Shape because the other Wild Shapes actually have quite a low armor class usually. So this is not bad whatsoever. So if I hit this dude, there's the potential to stun them. The one downside, the reason that I didn't give this 10 out of 10 is that it does require 2 Wild Shape charges. So you do have to take a short rest before you can turn into another Myrmidon. Stun maybe water. This can be very powerful because we get the healing vapors just like these summons do if you do Conjure Elemental cast at level 6. Anyway, I think these are great. Love being able to turn into these Myrmidons and they're very, very powerful indeed. So that leaves us with multi-classing potential, which again isn't really very high for Moon Druids. You mostly want to get to at least level 10 because otherwise you're not getting access to these powerful Wild Shapes. There can be some benefits for monks, for example, the unarmored defense or sorcerers, potentially barbarians as well, although a rage does take a bonus action and you can't rage while Wild Shaped, but you can get some kind of neat effects with your Wild Shapes, which of course your Circle of the Land Druid can get also. But here we've got stronger Wild Shapes to actually choose from. So that leaves us with the one and only Spores, and I will say that really, as I've said in maybe some of my other videos, especially the Cleric one, although my score for the Spores is higher, for Circle of the Moon it was 32 out of 50, for Spores here's 36. I would say that actually these two scores are more separated than I think they should be. Really, between Moon and Spores comes down to the playstyle I want to have when playing as a Druid, because the Spores Druid is very, very different to a Moon Druid and even Land Druid. Anyway, for the level 2 features, 8 out of 10. Same for the level 6 features. Then the level 10 features is a 7 out of 10. The other features they get down to a 6, multiclassing potential back up to 7. Pretty strong all around. So here's my Spores Druid. Now what do they get? They get a completely different use for the wild shape. I would generally cast it ahead of combat. You'll notice now I've got 48 temporary hit points. The temporary hit points you get is 4 times your Druid level. Not only that, while we have the symbiotic entity, we deal additional damage with melee weapon attacks and unarmed strikes, which is kind of cool. And it deals double damage with Halo of Spores. Well, what's Halo of Spores? This comes at level 2 also. You can use your reaction ahead of time. This is one of the few, if only, I can't think of another one, one of the few, if only, abilities that uses a reaction resource but isn't used as a reaction. So I can cast it, don't really want to cast it on these two, but let's do it on Withers. Now, because I've got my symbiotic entity, I actually did the damage twice. It rolled 1d8 twice, so 2d8. And we'd find that if there was a possibility of an opportunity attack, I wouldn't be able to do it because I've used my reaction ahead of time. No, this is really strong, very unique. Really, really cool. Lets you kind of build a melee druid that isn't just wild shaped, because we've got the extra temporary hit points, we're going to survive longer, and we deal more damage with our melee weapon attacks. Now, I will say, since I'm level 12, the Halo of Spores is 1d8 damage. At level 2, it is kind of only 1d4 damage. And so one of the benefits of level 6 is this goes up to 1d6. Also at level 6, the other thing we get is we get this fungal infestation charge, a unique resource to Circle of the Spores Druids. This lets you raise a zombie from a beast or humanoid corpse, and actually also uses a reaction. So Circle of the Spores Druids get 2 abilities that let them use their reactions outside of their reactions, which is just so cool. I've got to go find some corpses to raise. So here we are. Start raising some zombies. Not any old zombies, mind you, some fungal zombies. We only get 4 charges per long rest, and this number never goes up. But you can start having undead minions following you around. And this is on top of any other summons that we can get. Alright, so I've just raised a skeleton using a level 3 spell slot there. And we can conjure our woodland being, and so on. So our Spores Druid is not only a potential melee combatant, and at the very least very tanky, but also a better summoner than the other Druids because we get these extra undead zombies. So yeah, I really, really value that. But the zombies are relatively weak, they can die, but just like the other zombies, if you hit a target and they die within that turn, they actually summon a newborn zombie, so you can start overrunning some battles. Then at level 10, their Halo of Spores damage goes up to 1d8, and they get a new ability, completely new ability, which as long as you've got your symbiotic entity, you can cast Spreading Spores with a bonus action every single turn. In this area, within these spores, creatures take 2d8 necrotic damage, but not your allies. So on your turn, you're going to potentially be dealing damage with your bonus action, with Spreading Spores. You're actually going to be doing whatever you want with, maybe a melee attack. By the time we get to the higher levels, probably more likely to be a spell. And then you got your summons going in and soaking up damage. So one thing I love about Circle of the Spores is you get to do so many things on your turn that are a bit different, which not a lot of caster classes always get. For their other abilities, they get access to these spells, but it is these spells in particular. Now, Detect Thoughts and Blindness aren't my top picks for level 2 spells. They're not the worst things in the world, but they're just not usually one of my top picks, and we don't get a choice of these. Animate Dead, this fits so well with the class that it's needed. Gaseous Form, I don't particularly value too highly. I can see it does have uses outside of combat. Blight, I just think it's a bit of a crap spell for level 4 spell slot. Confusion's alright. Contagion I don't tend to use that much. Cloud Kill I like, but we don't get to choose these. So, it's not the lowest, it's not the highest. One thing I completely forgot to mention earlier, also at level 2, you get given the Bone Shield cantrip, which fixes a small weakness of the Druid class. The other damaging cantrips have only got short ranges. So Produce Flame is 30 feet, Thorn Whip is 30 feet, whereas Bone Chill is 60 feet. It's a kind of a full range cantrip. And it has a lovely little side effect of not allowing enemies to be healed if they're hit, which saves you in a couple of battles quite well. So overall, the Spores Druid I gave a 36 out of 50. These two are, in my opinion, are actually much closer. Almost should be the same number, potentially. I don't really see Spores Druid as that much better than the Moon Druid, but when I break it down into individual components, it adds up being greater. But they're 2 completely different playstyles. The Moon Druid, you are wild shaping probably most of the time. You're not gear dependent at all, because most gear doesn't work while you're wild shaped, so you don't have to worry about it. Spores Druid, you're kind of much more of a combination of a caster and a summoner, although summoners can be casters, but hopefully you get what I mean. And with the multi-classing potential, I always keep forgetting to talk about that. Spores Druid is quite high because of the symbiotic entity and the fact that it gives a benefit to melee weapons and weapon attacks. This means you can actually just dip 2 levels into Spores Druid and you start to be able to deal extra damage with your attacks. I see some people have talked about taking it on a monk, which is really cool because you do lots of attacks, so that starts to build up. Potentially a ranger, fighter, basically any melee class, but also it works really well with, in particular, wizard necromancers, because then you get all the summoning and necromancy from the bonuses from being the necromancy subclass, plus you get all of the summons from being the Circle of the Spores Druid. So I do feel like with Circle of the Spores there's more options for multiclassing. And one last thing I was thinking about, if I took out multiclassing and looked at it as just from a pure Druid point of view, 12 levels in Druid, these two do become just that little bit closer. Spores would go down to 29 and Moon would go down to 27, which aligns a bit more with how I feel about them rather than how I've analysed them. Anyway, you let me know what you think of the different Druid circles, subclasses. Which ones do you like, do you not like? Do you really hate Circle of the Land and Circle of the Spores? I don't know. You let me know. Thank you to all the members of my channel. Thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.